gang! In this movie we're going to go over how to move, rotate, and scale pattern fills in Adobe Illustrator flats. Let's get started. So I've got a long sleeve t-shirt flat here in Illustrator and we're going to fill it with a pattern. I just happen to have a pattern I created in Photoshop, so let's copy it, go back to Illustrator and paste it. There it is. You can see it's rather large. So before we make a pattern out of it, we want to reduce it. If we make a pattern out of something so large, it's going to really slow down Illustrator and it won't be very effective. So we'll double click on the scale tool right here. Let's take it down to 25% uniform and click OK. And now it's much smaller and easier to manage. We're going to go up to Window and open the Swatches panel. And all I have to do is select this pattern swatch that I brought in and drag it right into the gray area of the swatches panel, and it created a new swatch. I don't need this open anymore, so we'll close it, and I don't need this swatch anymore, so I'm going to delete that as well. Let's zoom in and talk about how to work with it. Since this is already grouped together, in order to fill it, we're going to go and use the group selection tool rather than ungroup this whole thing. So I'm going to click on the group selection tool, which is the white arrow with the plus sign. And now I'm going to click on the bodice of my shirt to select it. I can access my fills right over here in the properties panel and click on the pattern that I've loaded, and it fills my flat with the pattern. Now it's a little large, so how do we scale down a pattern inside a flat? Very easily. We're going to double click on the scale tool. And we are going to select the size we want to scale it to. I think 50% will probably work nicely in this case. And here is the secret. Down here where it says Transform Objects and Transform Patterns. If I were to just click Preview and let this happen, it's going to end up transforming the size of the object. And I do not want my shirt to be reduced. So we're going to make sure that Transform Objects is not checked and Transform Patterns is. And now when I click OK, it will reduce the size of my pattern, but not the size of my object. So that's how to scale a pattern. Let's talk about rotating. To rotate this pattern, I'm going to double click on the Rotate tool, which is hiding right here behind Reflect. We'll double click on it. If you know the angle that you want to rotate it to, for instance, let's put this on the bias, which is 45 degrees, we can type that angle in. And then again, we want to make sure that Transform Objects is not checked and Transform Patterns is. If we click OK, it's going to rotate my pattern 45 degrees. So that's the way you rotate a pattern. Lastly is how to move a pattern. To move a pattern, you first have to have it selected. So again, we want to make sure that we're using the Group Selection tool to select the piece with the pattern fill. Then I'm going to switch to the black arrow, which in this case serves as the Move tool. If I double click on it, you'll notice that it gives me the opportunity to type in a point size in which to move my pattern, which is great if I knew what the point size was that I wanted to use, but actually I have no idea. I need to do this in a much more visual way. But before I exit from this panel, I want to make sure once again that Transform Objects is turned off and Transform Patterns is turned on. Now I'm going to cancel this because I don't know what this size really is going to come out to be. And I'm going to show you a much more interactive way to do it. While in this black arrow, if you hold down the tilde key on your keyboard, the tilde key is that little swiggly key in the upper left-hand corner right next to the number 1. If you hold the tilde key and then click and drag with your mouse, you can change the position of the pattern. I can either drag it up and down, or I can click and drag it right to left. And this is what is going to allow me to adjust the placement of my pattern. And I think I like the look of that, so I'm going to click to release. And let's move on to the sleeves. Again, I'm going to use the Group Selection tool, click on one sleeve, go to my fills, and select my pattern. Now, in the case of this one, the pattern's on the wrong angle, and it's also too big because remember we scaled this down 50%. I can go through the same steps I did before, or instead I can click on the eyedropper tool, and it's hanging out over here in the toolbar. The shortcut key for it is the letter I. While the sleeve is selected, if I use the eyedropper tool to click on the pattern that's set the way I want it, it will copy the scale and the rotation of that pattern to the other piece. So that's a really quick way of doing it. So let's do the other sleeve. I'm going to grab the group selection tool, click on the sleeve. I can select the eyedropper tool just using the I key on my keyboard, and then click on this sleeve to have a matching fill. So let's talk about one more way to change the angle on the pattern. What if I don't want the sleeve on the bias to match the rest of this? What if the sleeve is on a slightly different angle and I don't know what that angle is? Well, here's how you handle it. You select the piece, and then I'm going to click once on the rotate tool. And just like I did before with the move tool, I can hold down the tilde key, click on my sleeve, and drag to rotate the angle of my pattern until I come up with one that I'm happy with. And I'm going to go ahead and rotate until I find something, and I think that looks pretty good. And now I want that same pattern to be on this sleeve over here. So there's a really cool way I can do that. I'm going to go back to my group selection tool, select this sleeve, grab the eyedropper, and eyedrop this sleeve. So I now have the same pattern, the same rotation, the same scale in both sleeves. But what I really want this sleeve to do is be the mirror opposite of the sleeve on the other side. And in order to make that happen, I need to reflect the pattern in the sleeve. So I'm going to go to my reflect tool, double click on it to open it up. I'm going to select vertical. Again, make sure that transform objects is not checked and transform patterns is, and I'm going to click OK. And that just mirrored the direction of the sleeve. And now all I need to do is switch to my black arrow, right, the move tool, hold down the tilde key, and I can go ahead and just move this around a little bit until it is matching the placement of the sleeve pattern in my other sleeve. And what I'm looking at is this little shape here, and if you move across, you can see it there. So now my sleeves mirror each other in placement. The scale is right, the angle is right, and I'm pretty happy with it. Let's repeat that on the back of the shirt. And the easy way to do that is, again, grab my group selection tool, click on the back of the shirt, switch to the eyedropper, copy the bodice, back to my group selection tool, select the sleeve, go to the eyedropper, click on the sleeve, again, group selection tool, click on the sleeve, switch to the eyedropper, select the sleeve from the front of the shirt to match it on the back, and there you have it. That is how you rotate and fill and scale patterns in Adobe Illustrator. If you liked this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And for more courses on Adobe for Fashion, visit lynda.com and type in fashion design.